Stuart, thank you for joining me this morning.
Good morning.
Firstly, I think it'd be useful for a listener to understand what exactly is cardiovascular disease.
Well, cardiovascular disease is when a problem is something to do with your heart, right? And so your heart has two components that are primary, at least an electrical side and a plumbing side, much like your house does. And so if there is some problem with the plumbing side or some problem with the electrical side, the electricals are what we call arrhythmias. And then when you consider the plumbing side, that has to do with the function of your heart. When you have a problem with either one of those sides, one side can affect the other, and those can grow and become much more complex. And if not caught early enough, or left untreated, can lead to the kind of the ultimate expense, and that's could cost a person their life. But if found early and treated well with their physicians, then intervention is the key, and life expectancy can be had in a great quality of life.
And cardiovascular disease here in the UK and around the world, and also in America, the statistics are quite frightening, aren't they?
They are. It's one of the leading causes of death. It's just one of the largest disease states that causes complications, and it's one of the biggest costs to the health systems as well.
32% of deaths around the world, I've read, and in this country, it costs the NHS about 7.5 billion a year for having to treat patients who suffer from cardiovascular disease and who traditionally have difficulty in monitoring the problems with their heart.
Yeah, it is. I think the numbers are that way because of some of the limitations that we've had is just being able to get the patient's information, depending on their location, their socioeconomic status, being able to get that information and get that information, enough of that information in front of people who can actually make decisions about their healthcare, and do that in a low cost effective way where everybody can have access. That's been one of the biggest problems, and that's why the costs and the numbers and the stats that you see are so staggering. So that's one of the things we've set out to do is change that to get the data earlier in a much broader way, in a much more cogent way for physicians, clinicians to intervene sooner.
And personally, as someone who has suffered a heart attack some 17 years ago or thereabouts, and I'm just actually waiting to go in and get a stent fitted in 2 weeks' time, measurement of anything to do with my heart can't happen outside of a hospital. So I have to be in there to be wired up to an ECG, or to have an echocardiogram taken or something like that before the professionals can actually see what's going on. So I believe that you and your company are involved in the development of a mobile or a monitoring solution that's not connected up to a system by wires.
Mm-hmm. We have been, yes. We've been building that since inception. In fact, it's a small wearable device that you can carry in your hand or in your pocket. It connects to a Bluetooth sensor, which can be stuck on your body with electrodes, and that electrode is what captures the heartbeats from your body, and it transmits that to the telephone, the communication device, sends it up to the cloud where we run it through our AI, and we're able to then to present that information up and down to the cloud. That's about 3 minutes in terms of time by the time it leaves your body to the time it gets assessed and then presented directly to a clinician who needs to see that. And if there's something important, if let's say, for instance, we were able to determine that you had an arrhythmia that was slowing your heart down too much, then that would kick off an alert that would meet a criteria where the doctor would ask for us to give them a call so that they could call you and tell you, hey, you need to either get to the hospital or change your medication or something of that nature. So definitely exists today. We're definitely working on some great technologies that will evolve in terms of AI. I think one of the tests that you'll probably get before your procedure is an ultrasound, where they want to be able to take a test to find out how much your blood ejects every time it takes a beat. And we're working on some AI with the Mayo Clinic that will allow us to tell you that number without having to get an ultrasound. We can do that through an ECG. So pretty impressive stuff. So we're looking forward to that. It's not ready yet. We expect that probably in the next year or so, but it's an exciting time to be in remote monitoring because it'll certainly help with patients such as you and myself too. I also am a cardiac patient, and it'll help me from having to go to the doctor. I can have a device at home that can send information even
Particularly,
about my blood.
yeah, particularly important for people who have got arrhythmias or any kind of atrial fibrillation of anything of that sort, which is a irregular heartbeat or something that they suddenly can come upon them. I was out of interest when I was in the hospital getting my angiogram. There was a patient opposite me. He was admitted because he was having periods of time when his pulse was very high, probably 250, even when he was sitting watching television. And that's kind of normally what you would expect if you were running a marathon, I think. And they were trying to understand what his issue was. But the reason that he was in there was to have an angiogram and also to be wired up to an ECG so that they could do the monitoring. This, I guess, is going to be a game changer for those types of patients and provide them with a huge amount of confidence that they can monitor it on a regular basis.
That's exactly right. That's precisely what we monitor for. In fact, I've had that exact scenario, and I put our monitor on me, and I had an electrophysiologist, which is the person that specializes on that, on the other end of the wire, telling me, "You're okay. What you're feeling is uncomfortable, but let's get you on some medication." So they were able to call the pharmacy for me right away, and I was able to make it back home from my trip before I ultimately went and saw the doctor. But peace of mind is what I felt in that moment. So that's certainly that's where we are in today's technology, and the more people know about it, the better, because we want them talking to their doctors and asking for this kind of technology.
And Stuart, AI means sometimes a lot to people, but sometimes nothing at all because they don't understand it. What in simple terms, is AI doing with this particular example?
Sure. Well, I'll give you. We're in two buckets really. One is pretty simplistic in that what we use is we use a computer where we train an algorithm with data that we already have, and and clinicians have already read these studies and marked it normal or abnormal, and we get a 10 or 20 or 30,000 of these studies, and then we train an algorithm to be able to look at that data just like a human being would. And then what that does is that creates a new algorithm, and that creates efficiency for our algorithms to present information that's already been assessed at a human level so that the clinicians or the humans can actually look at the data with a higher degree of trust. So that's kind of on a workflow perspective. So that's where the artificial intelligence or AI comes in. It's just a training of a particular set of mathematics and how it looks at data. On the clinical side, it's different, where, to your point, you made the reference about atrial fibrillation, and getting to the cath lab and having a heart rate of over 200 they found it way too late. So it's interesting. We're finding is that your ECG has a lot of hidden information that we didn't know existed until we started to look at vast amounts of information and correlating that with other clinical information. So to that point, we can now look at your ECG and determine what's your potential to have AFib before you ever have any symptoms.
Wow.
And with correlating data that studies have been done out of the Mayo Clinic, it's already been published. It's very promising that what we're doing is we're bringing clinical artificial intelligence to market to detect through an ECG what we call latent disease that's sitting there that hasn't manifested yet, so that we can intervene sooner before you would even ever have symptoms, so that you never have those symptoms. So that's the difference between the differences in AI. There's a kind of a workflow efficiency, and then there's really the clinical value of impacting patients' lives, really transformative stuff.
And of course, this is the type of advancement that starts to reduce the cost of our National Health Service. So take the cost out because it's not working after something has happened. It's preventative or giving much earlier warning. So people, A, have a much greater chance of survival, and B, they can be medicated, and also the cost of treatment over the period that they're suffering from cardiovascular disease is reduced.
It's one of the primary goals. It's to reduce the cost and improve the quality of life. So early health versus early demise.
Yeah. And is this something that's going to be available on the National Health Service, or something that you hope is?
Well, we hope we're not out of the U.S. yet, but we certainly have our sights set on a global scale. Our collaboration with Mayo Clinic is they're obviously worldwide recognized. They have partnerships in all nearly all countries on the globe, and so we would expect that we'll bring a lot of this really innovative AI through their research labs to market, and we'll take that to all the countries that we can, because everybody's heart beats the same no matter where you live in the world.
Fantastic, Stuart. And if people want to find out a little bit more, can they read up on this and find information on the net?
Absolutely. I think our website is a great place to start. It's InfoBionic, spells just like it sounds, .ai, and there's all sorts of resources under our news and events page. Otherwise, you can search virtual telemetry or remote cardiac monitoring on the internet, and it'll return lots of good information.
Fantastic, Stuart. Thanks very much indeed for coming on the program today, and for clarifying for me some of the detail behind cardiovascular disease, and how this great invention can help dramatically, saving some of the deaths that we have, which of course, during what is effectively Vascular Awareness Month, amongst other things. November's a month for male mental health and prostate cancer specifically, and so this is just another thing that we're focusing on this month. So it's great information. So thank you very much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.